these are your fans, and these are the people who care more than anybody, right? I mean, fans are fans. Most of Bills fans are fans for life. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for being with me today. Jenna and Dan both getting a Veteran Day off today. We are in the Connors and Ferris podcast studio, and this is our league podcast brought to you by Stellar Roofing, Windows, and Siding. Expect a stellar job every time. We got a few things to talk about today. Brandon Beane's talking. Well, actually, all the Bills management group is talking. Joe Brady and Brandon Beane. And I think this week, and maybe by the time you see this, we'll have already talked to the coordinators. There's an opportunity I think we're going to have to talk to them before we go to the NFL Combine. So everybody's doing talking now because it's talking before the real work gets started. But Beane with some interesting comments that he made in an article that was published this week. So we will talk about that. We'll look at the game itself, the Super Bowl, and what's going to go on between the New England Patriots, a team you guys all know well, and the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. So, and what's going on around the league sometimes, and you wonder what some of these teams are doing. But I guess as we begin, we could say to some people, they were wondering, what are the Buffalo Bills doing, right? Because it has been a whirlwind over the last few weeks, the firing of Sean McDermott, the hiring of Joe Brady, and now the coordinators coming in and the new look Buffalo Bills. So Brandon Beane has spoken a couple of times recently, the day after, or whatever it was, a couple days after the Sean McDermott firing. We got a chance to hear from Brandon Beane. That was the day he was there with Terry Pegula, a news conference that did not go well. And then a much more buttoned up, great presentation of Joe Brady as the head coach. Brandon Beane spoke there. And you've heard a lot of that so far, a lot of the comments about where this organization is going. And then Brandon Beane recently did an interview along with some other members, including Pete Gwelly, the team president of the Bills and the Sabres, with Tyler Dunn, who's a reporter, reports out of Buffalo, used to work in the media market in Buffalo. Now he has his own Substack, golong.com. So that is where he writes, and he has written a lot of articles. And you may remember one of the articles he wrote a little while ago, a couple of years ago, was on Sean McDermott. It was the story about Sean McDermott that came out with his speech to the team at halftime involving 9/11 terrorists, and when everything looked like it was going to blow up then. That, just in case you aren't familiar, Tyler's written a lot of things. In case you weren't familiar, as far as the Bills are concerned, to specific recent history and Sean McDermott, that was an article. And now he does another one. And it's an interesting inside look at what the Bills did in order to go through the process after the firing of Sean McDermott to the hiring of Joe Brady. And one part is getting the national attention. And I will say it is a long article. You can read it on your own. It is a paid site. That's how he makes his money. But if you want to read it, I've read the article. It was very interesting. There's a lot of detail there. Some of it goes back to issues with Sean McDermott, at least from the writer's perspective and from his reporting from people around the team, whether it was former players or former coaches, about issues with McDermott, things he did poorly, things that, including his relationship with Josh Allen. There's a lot in there that you may have not read in other places for different reasons, but it's in there. But the main thrust of the article, at least in the beginning, is the process of getting to the point of Joe Brady. And in it is the quote, and it's been discussed on all the, network shows, because it's an easy line to take that and say, what did he mean by that? Or what does that mean for the organization? And this is the quote. When, according to the article, references were made by the author saying there were polls, like the one in the Buffalo News, I believe it was, what the approval rating of the firing of Sean McDermott. And I've seen, I think there was a couple different ones. Initially it was very low. And then I think it might have been like it was 25%, whatever the number was. People were not happy in big numbers at the firing. And then even the hiring of Joe Brady, I think initially it got like a 35% approval from fans. Initial reaction. What do you think? Do you like it? Do you not like it? So it was very low numbers for both the firing of McDermott and then the subsequent hiring and elevation of Joe Brady. And this is the quote in there. He's quoting Brandon Beane. And to me, question mark, he says, F the outside. I mean, he puts the quote in. I don't need to say it to you. I've said the word enough times. I don't need to say it here. F the outside. It's about the right selection for this team. And if we win, they'll love it. It's the same thing I said when I took Josh Allen. If I'm wrong, the moving company will be at my house. So I understand, and I'm not going to have regret of choosing someone to appease the outside if I thought it should have been something different. If I'm wrong, I'll effing take my job and go effing home. Through it all, and then it goes on to other things. So it's a man who's confident in the decision that he made to elevate Joe Brady. And you should have confidence in it, right? I mean, you made this call. It is, well, the biggest decision the franchise made initially was drafting Josh Allen, right? And so Brandon Beane has that on his ledger. I think Sean McDermott was a very, very good decision by this team 9 years ago to go in the head coach. You know where they were at the time. No matter how many things are written to diminish Sean McDermott elevated this franchise by a significant amount. Joe Brady's job is to elevate it from that point to the next point, which is maybe small in elevation, but massive in impact, right? To go from being a perennial playoff team, a team that wins a playoff game every year, to then trying to get to that Super Bowl and go past that. So when I read this about Brandon Beane, you can take it a couple of ways. Like I appreciate his confidence in saying, I have to do what's best and F the outside. I don't know the specifics of how the question was asked in terms of, there was a reference to the polls, but in terms of a lot of times when people like Brandon Beane maybe, or, even us sometimes, when we think of the outside, we think of national media, the way it's perceived. And it was perceived negatively, I think in large part because of the way the news conference went. And especially with Terry Pagula in that first news conference, I think that's where a lot of the negativity was. Because Sean McDermott has certainly received his level of criticism, but just the way it happened after the game that it happened, it was negative. And I can see blocking out that outside. Now, there is an old line. I should know who initially said it. It gets credited to other people. I think it even gets credited to Marv, but it's the quote of, stop listening to the fans or pretty soon you're going to be sitting with them. And I do understand that part. But there is one thing about saying, I need to make this decision. I have more information. I am chosen to be the guy to pick the next coach. And then there's another part to say, like, screw them. This is my call and I'll live and die with it. Because these are your fans and these are the people who care more than anybody, right? I mean, fans are fans. Most of Bills fans are fans for life. I mean, so if a player goes to another team, his whole family goes with him to that team, right? It's kind of hard to give up your Bills fandom. So I don't really believe that Brandon Beane doesn't care about the fans. But in this case, it comes out as in that's outside noise. That's outside the building. Now, he is right about this is, it's going to fall back on him positively or negatively, right? And I guess to some extent, Josh Allen, right? Because the organization has not shied away from criticism of Sean McDermott, backed away from it at the Joe Brady news conference. But these articles and this information coming somewhat through the team are critical of McDermott. I am not saying Brandon Beane is specifically saying these things, but it is an article with a lot of access to the Bills that's pretty critical of Sean McDermott. So that's all fine and dandy, but I keep saying the same thing. Sean McDermott's gone. So people can say whatever they want about why the team has fallen short, But at this point, it doesn't matter. It's on Brandon Beane and Joe Brady and Josh Allen and Terry Pagula, I guess, right? To get it done. So it's digging in. Like, it is fully digging in to say, this is my guy. Now, you are walking a bit of a thin line. I mean, they knew Joe Brady. So when you read this, it's reiterated what was said at the news conference, that they took it upon themselves to say, Joe Brady's Joe Brady. We're looking at him as a new candidate. Okay. And that's understandable. I appreciate that because it is a different job, right? I'm a person here. It's a long time ago. I elevated from reporter to sports director. It's a different job. I will tell you, back then, they didn't really interview me for that second job. And to be honest with you, I wasn't ready for that second job. I took it because they offered it to me. It was not like some huge interview. They liked what I did on the air. The reality is the other job is much bigger, much different. But regardless, I don't know how I convinced them or what they thought. Maybe it's just because I was there, but I got the job. Very different than what Joe Brady is going through, where he's going through 2 full-on interviews, and he's already been there, and we're talking about $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar business that he's running, at least as far as the football end is concerned. But you are saying, like, it was Terry Pagula who fired Sean, and then a little more than a week later, through the series of interviews, Joe Brady got the job. He was the in-house candidate, and he's the only candidate to get more than one interview. I don't have a problem in that sense with them picking Joe Brady. But I do believe that at some point there was thoughts in anybody in the organization's head of maybe what Joe could be. Certainly before they knew that teams were going to reach out to them about Joe to be their head coach elsewhere. And then as soon as the season was over, they got those calls right away to interview him. So I think it's pretty natural you would at least in your mind say, what would this guy be like? But we go from the point of saying he was fired by the owner within a week, picking the guy, and now we are all in, fully all in on Joe. And I'm sure he did a very good job in the interview. I have no doubt. I watched him in the news conference. I saw a different level of guy in terms of looking more and sounding more the part. He didn't need to sound the part before, right? Because when you work for somebody, no matter how much clout you might have in the building, in your own world, you're not the head coach. And he will be different than Sean McDermott. But he did show that. And I think there's going to be a lot of positives. But we have no idea yet, right? Brandon Beane's job is to fix the roster because he can say what everybody wants, but we know the roster needs to be better. And he's going to need different guys for Jim Leonard. And Joe Brady needs more help. Josh Allen needs more help. Let's be honest. They did. They needed it last year, and they didn't have it. So they're going to have to do all those things to make it better. And then Joe's got to win. And he's got to win right away. And that doesn't mean he's 1 year, and if it doesn't work, he's out. I don't believe that. But they have not taken a step back, a true step back under Sean McDermott. They just haven't. You could say this year was, but they still made the playoffs. They still won double-digit games. They still won a playoff game. So, yes, they did not win the division, and a team in the division got to the Super Bowl. And I know that pisses everybody off. It pisses you guys off. But when you look at it overall, if that's a step back, that's a relatively minor one, right? You have more competition, and that team had a great year. Let's see what it is going forward. But I don't believe it was like, oh, boy. Like, say, even the Ravens did, or my God, even the Chiefs. Chiefs are a different story because they've won so much. But, they took a big step back. They missed the playoffs. So, I mean, that's what happens. So it'll be interesting to see. If you want to read the article, like I said, it's a paid site. You go on there. It's, not crazy expensive. So, can support local journalism or area journalism, but it's pretty deep into the process that the team said they went through. And then, some of the things are similar criticism of McDermott from the previous articles that were written. So, but like I said, McDermott's, oh, I have to push back on one thing. It says McDermott conversely believed the Bills ran through McDermott. By the time he tried to change and asked Allen to do Snow Angels live on TV that we saw, it was too forced, too unnatural. Nobody completely changes who they are at the age of 50. I changed a lot at 50. I can tell you that. You go through things in your life and you go through things at work. And I think people around me would say that. I'm not Sean McDermott. I don't know how much he actually changed. I saw that. I can relate to that a little bit. I'm like, you can change a lot. Life changes a lot as you get older. Some of you who are older maybe certainly get that. You know, I push back on people who say, you know, you get older and you get more set in your ways. I've changed a lot. So I think people can change. They still are at their core usually who they are, but some people become, you know, more conservative, tougher to be around. Some people lighten up a little bit. Some people realize life is short, life is good, and they act differently, treat people differently. So that part I would push back a little bit on, because you can change a little bit. And maybe for Sean McDermott, some of those things he didn't change will happen in his next job. But that's here nor there with the Buffalo Bills franchise now, because it is on Brandon Beane. It is on Joe Brady. It is on everybody who is part of this new look organization. And it will look different. It is going to be different. So let's see how it plays out. And now we all get to watch the Super Bowl. I will say for many reasons, I'm less, I won't even say enthusiastic. You know, there's been reasons I've been excited about a Super Bowl. Obviously, you guys know I follow the Eagles. They've been in, what, three of them in the last 8 years, and won 2 of them, which was great for them, for the organization. Those are obviously a very different experience. And then most years, I'm usually rooting against somebody. It's by nature. I always root against people, like in terms of sports. Like, you know, it's pretty easy in this one, right? I do not want to see the Patriots win the Super Bowl. They've been good, really good this year. They may be building something for a long time, and they swooped right past the Bills. Drake May got himself in the Super Bowl. So I'm sure the majority of you, if you're watching this, you are Seahawks fans for this game. Seahawks have been favorites the whole way through. The Drake May stuff is really fascinating to look at the numbers. And I know it's not always numbers but you read stuff and say he's the first quarterback to face, I think it's 3 top 5 defenses in the playoffs and on the way to the Super Bowl, which is true. And he has. They've only averaged, I think, 18 points a game. So they've won. And Drake May has made plays, made a few tough throws, I think, in that Chargers game. One really nice one, 2 really nice ones in the Houston game. And, you know, not as much in that Broncos game. That ended up being half the game in the snow. But those other numbers, man, 55% passing, 6 fumbles, lost 3, 2 interceptions, sacked 15 times. Like that's a lot. That is not great numbers. That being said, guess what? He's in the Super Bowl and he's playing for a championship in year number 2. But this Patriots team certainly has won with defense and situational football, and all of that from their perspective has been impressive. Seahawks are really good. You know, you watch a team and you see them during the year and you think, oh, it's Sam Darnold, Mike McDonald's a newer coach, you know, it's the defense looks good. And then you see them in moments like what they did to the Niners, which I know the Niners were beaten up, but like they hammered them. And then they beat the Rams again. They were in a tough division. I mean, those teams, honestly, San Francisco in another year could have made the Super Bowl, right? Even with all their injuries. The Rams were really good, and the Seahawks beat them when it mattered most twice, and they made it to the Super Bowl. Their defense plays really well, and you know, the number one score, giving up 17 points a game. Again, in a division with the Rams and the Niners, 2 teams with great offenses and great offensive coordinators. That Seahawks defense is for real. So we'll see how they play. You know the history between the 2 in the Super Bowl. The Russell Wilson pass with Marshawn Lynch on the bench, like craziness that New England won that game. But let's see how it plays out. It's funny, Sam Darnold and Drake May. Drake May drafted what was he, 2nd overall? Drake, second overall. Yeah, Drake May. Was he? I should know that right off the top of my head. And Sam Darnold drafted third. Obviously, you guys know that that was the year of Josh Allen's draft. The Jets took him, poor guy, and he ended up, going right away to the Jets, and then he's bounced around. He's been all over the place. So, he's a guy that looked like his career was just going to be nothing. I mean, third overall. That's right. They're both third overall. And so, Sam Darnold was like a lost sheep. And then he goes to Minnesota and plays great until the biggest moments. Now, give him credit for this. With Seattle in the biggest games, he played great. He played great. And it was mostly, against the Rams. Now he's going to need to do it in the Super Bowl. And Drake May, third overall, things were terrible last year. Vrabel comes in, everything changes, and they start winning. And he's played really, really well. So we can complain about schedules all you want and who they got. They played against some tough defenses too, and he played well. Now, again, not so great in the playoffs, but in just his second year to make the Super Bowl this way, you got to give him the credit and see where they are. And he has Stephon Diggs, who's doing a lot of talking. By the way, he said, Bills fans, hang in there. Hang in there. So I'm sure you love hearing that of Steph Diggs in the Super Bowl. And I wanted to add one other thing. Bad Bunny is going to play at the Super Bowl. Do yourself a favor. When you have relatives that try to ask you about him, just play dumb. You're not going to win the battle. They won't get him. I think he's kind of funny listening to him. Obviously, he's got talent. You don't have to love him. You can love him. Yes, it's Spanish. He's singing Grandpa or Uncle Joe, right? Yes. And I'm sure it'll be a highly volatile reaction to his performance. So my advice would be, if it's in a big family party with some families, maybe you leave and you go watch it later if you want to watch it, just because you'll probably hear some stuff. At least I know, not my individual fan, but sometimes, it depends on the group you're with. I think it'll be kind of funny. There will be reaction. I can say that. There will be reaction. And last thing I wanted to talk about, I heard this today on WGR. They were talking about all the changes that have gone in the NFL. There's only 8 teams this year, 8 out of 32, that did not make a significant change, meaning offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or head coach. Only 8. The Patriots are one of them. At the moment, the Seahawks are another, but I think everybody believes Clint Kubiak's going to the Raiders, so we'll take them out of the mix. And some are, like the Vikings didn't make a change, which makes sense. Because of the coaches that they have. Flores stayed there as defensive coordinator. The Texans did not. The Colts did not. The Panthers did not. The Saints did not. First-year head coach there. The Jags and the Bengals. So the Bengals. You know what? I think that Bengals one is wrong. I think Lou Anarumo is not back with the Bengals. Maybe I got to look that one up to see for sure. I don't think he went back there. Anyhow, the reason I brought it up is the Giants are obviously one of those teams. And they brought in John Harbaugh right away, $20 million. He's going to be the guy there. He's got Jackson Dart, who has ability. Matt Nagy, offensive coordinator. It could work, Giants fans. It could. I do not see that as a really good mix. Matt Nagy has not had great success. Kansas City kind of, brought him back and then pushed him back out again. It hasn't worked for him really anywhere recently. You've got this young prize of a quarterback, and that's the guy John Harbaugh hires. I would have gone, I would have gone differently. I would have gone different thinking, younger, progressive thinking. But hey, that's the Giants. They've had some of their own issues. So anyhow, get yourself ready for the Super Bowl. Hey, Kraft and Belichick didn't make the Hall of Fame, so you won't see them out on the field while the Patriots are playing. So look, Belichick should have made it, obviously. And Kraft, whatever there is a formula for an owner to get there, Kraft should be there, right? I don't get a vote for the Hall of Fame, but it is kind of interesting that neither of them made it in a year where they would announce it at the Super Bowl and the Patriots are playing. Yeah. I do know I was happy when the Eagles were in Super Bowls that Brian Dawkins and Eric Allen both made it the year they won the Super Bowls. So maybe that says something about the Patriots. Maybe they're not going to win, but we will see. Well, enjoy the game. Enjoy the chicken wings, dips, whatever you're having. Dan and Jenna will be joining me. We're going to be talking Bills the rest of the week. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about what Brandon Beane had to say. So that's going to do it for me from the Connors and Ferris podcast studio. This has been The League, brought to you by Stellar Roofing, Windows, and Siding. Expect a stellar job every time. Once again, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Did I not say that at the beginning? Shame on me. Maybe I did. I'm getting old. That's going to do it for me. For Dan and Jenna, I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for watching The League podcast on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel.